Welcome to the D.A.R.E.Podcast. This is a successful mindset podcast, and I am your host, Miranda Brawn. I'm so excited to bring you the latest tips, advice, and wisdom on how to create a successful mindset to manifest your goals in life and create abundance in health, wealth, and love. Tune in every month and then hit the repeat button to become the best version of yourself. Baroness Delyth Morgan, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today at the D.A.R.E.Podcast. Welcome. And this podcast, for those that don't know, it's all about having a successful mindset. And I thought, who better than having you come here to share your tips for our audience, our listeners. No pressure.
No pressure.
But I mean, you've done so much, and I can't wait to get into this conversation. I mean, you're the CEO. I know you're retired, and we're recording this as of January 2024, and you're retiring as of spring 2024, but you are now still the CEO of Breast Cancer Now, and you're a member of the House of Lords, and you've had such a wonderful career journey. I can't wait for us to delve into that, but why don't we start right at the very beginning? What were you like as a child, and what were your career aspirations? I think I read somewhere you wanted to be a scientist. Is that true?
I did. That's absolutely true. But before then, I wanted to be a cowboy. So we could probably just scoot over that a bit. But
I love that. Not a cowgirl, but a cowboy.
Yeah, I was definitely when I was 5. I used to wear a little cowboy hat and call myself Cowboy Joe.
I did the same. I had the little toy guns.
Yes, everything.
Loved
it. Yeah. So when I got my head out of the cardboard box that I used to hide in when anyone wanted to take a picture of me, I did want to be a scientist, and that was because I think I was very inspired by my mother, who was a biology teacher.
Yeah.
And she absolutely, she kind of exuded kind of enthusiasm about science. And so my older sister, Adrian, she actually did go to university, study, do a PhD, and became a scientist, and still now is a honorary lecturer. But for me, I just loved the science. I loved the kind of the how things work side of science and discovery and so on. But then, of course, I did go to university to do a science degree, and I loved it. But then when I was at university, I found out about the student union. And I found out about Rag Week, and I found out about the whole world out there of things that you could do that would be all about, creating a better world.
Yes.
And because that was originally why I was interested in science. You could find a cure for this, or you could make, improve people's quality of life. But actually what I discovered about myself was that I was much more interested in the bigger picture, and I found it quite hard to focus on the amount of detail that you need to do when you're a scientist. You need to really delve into the minutiae, and I thought, and actually now, having been involved in a medical research charity for so long, I now know that this isn't the case. But when I was at university, I thought it meant spending a lot of time on your own in the lab or in the library, and actually it's not like that at all. If you're engaged in science now, it's an international, phenomena. You're travelling around the world quite often. You're, meeting all sorts of different people. So it isn't quite what I thought. But I just, came into contact with a whole host of charities, a whole host of good causes. It was at the same. I mean, you're far too young, but one of the big things that we were engaged in was the anti-apartheid movement, and
I remember that when I was at school.
You'd be
Free Nelson Mandela, and
exactly,
all of that.
Making sure you don't buy the wrong product, and that you're not. It was. I can remember the first time I had a Del Monte pineapple chunks was a big luxury, because anyway, but that was too long. But so I learned all about that through being involved in my student union, and and that's really how I got involved in the charity sector, because although I loved the science side of things, I actually liked the people and the campaigning and the fundraising that we all used to do. It was at the time of Band-Aid and all of that as well.
Yeah.
So it was. I ended up not pursuing that, but then in a funny way pursuing it as a funder of medical research, I don't actually have to do it. I can just fund amazing people to do the discoveries rather than having to do it all myself.
And you've still got that, that interaction with scientists. Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful message, because you are a woman in STEM. So I think that's, science, technology, engineering, maths, for those that aren't familiar with that terminology. And I think you're such a great role model. So for the next generation of women, or even current generation of women and men, to see, the career journey that you've had. Which university did you go to? Did you study biology there? Or?
I did physiology at Bedford College, that was actually part of London University. It was based in Regent's College. And then it merged with Royal Holloway College and moved out to Royal Holloway College. But I actually ended up in University College, where they had a physiology course that was part of the kind of intercalated BSc that they did for medical students. So I had a couple of years out in the middle of my degree when I was president of my student union and president of London University. So I had quite a kind of unusual university career, but it was the most amazing career, because after I'd done my kind of sabbatical officer roles, I then had to go back and remember, science, okay, and but it was amazing, because the people on the course with me were really bright, and they were just taking a year out of their medical education to do a bit of a science, an extra science degree, and they were some of the people that went on and did PhDs and things and went on to medical research. So it was really interesting meeting those people, but I was also really interested in all the kind of issues of the day, so I was too excited to get out and get a job, and my first job was actually at Shelter.
I read that. Yes, the homeless charity.
It was a great experience, because I worked for Shelter at the time when Sheila McKechnie was the director, and she was a very, very inspiring woman leader, and for me it was good, to see somebody who was. She would always say, I'm no expert, but I know what's right and wrong, and I know that what's happening for homeless people now is completely outrageous, and we need to change it. And it was just really, she didn't take any prisoners. She was really a very
passionate,
very
and you
passionate
need that.
and dynamic. And I really found that inspiring, to have that woman role model at the top of the organisation, because at the time, in the late 80s, that feels a long time ago now. It was all men. There were there were hardly any women chief executives, and so then that helped me to think, maybe I could have a career in the charity sector, doing all this work that I really love, and I'd seem to have a natural aptitude for. So I carried on, and. So then, one of the things, I know you're going to ask me, one of the things that I did was I was kind of willing to take a few risks in my career. And I think in the charity sector, certainly, when I started all those years ago, there were lots of organisations that were quite... vulnerable, because funding wasn't great, similar to now, really. There isn't the security. You can go work for a smaller charity that maybe captures your passion, but actually, might not be there to pay the rent. So, I did actually have to take a few risks. I went to work for the Workplace Nurseries campaign after I worked at Shelter, and that organisation was funded only on an annual basis by a grant that it got from a body called the London Grants Committee, and so I was giving up a very comparatively secure job at Shelter to go and run this campaign, which was to end the tax on workplace nurseries. Hard to believe now, but there used to be a tax on workplace nurseries. Anyway, so it was taking that risk, being prepared to give it a go, and it did work out for me. I learned so much in that role. And that from there I went to the National Asthma Campaign, it's now called Asthma UK. And that's where I went into a charity that was funding medical research for the first time and developing medical health information. It was really evidence-based, and I thought, wow, this is so interesting. How do you make sure it's really independent? How do you make sure that you're delivering what people with asthma really want to hear about, and that you're actually balancing all the different needs of different communities? So it was really, really interesting. So that's how it kind of, my career started off, but it was always about taking risks.
I think that's so important. I think that's definitely a good success tip to advise our listeners and viewers. The fact that you've got to take a risk, but a calculated risk, but take a risk if you want to really proceed. But you've also been a government minister. I'm doing some research on you. So tell me about that. How did you get into that?
Well, I don't think anyone really knows how you end up in the House of Lords. There are lots of different ways of ending up in the House of Lords, but I think I came into the Lords. I was invited by Tony Blair to become, to be put forward to Her Majesty the Queen as of then, and so I think really it was because of my background in the voluntary sector, my experience in breakthrough breast cancer as of then, and other kind of campaigning charities, and so I came into the House of Lords and then spent a few years on the backbenches as a government backbencher, kind of learning the ropes basically, which it was quite an alien environment for me, not being a politician, so not having done the apprenticeship really. So I had there were some amazing people in there who helped me, and then after a while, when I'd learned how the House of Lords worked and how you have to work across parties and across different interest groups and so on to get things done. I was then asked to be what is a very junior minister in the government. So it's what they call a whip. It's not really like a whip in the Commons, where because there aren't government ministers from every single department in the House of Lords, you have these, what was, I was known as a baroness in waiting. And you have to answer for that, for all of the government. So you could get a question on, as I did, I got a question on garden sheds one day. And then a question on Latin education the next
day. So it wasn't anything to do with health really, it could be anything.
No, it wasn't anything. I mean, and that was the incredible challenge, was that you were, forever having to take, learn up the brief, take the questions, answer them to the best of your ability, and and try and do as sound a job as you possibly can, all for different subjects all the time. So it was quite an experience.
But keeps you on your toes.
It absolutely keeps you on your toes, and this is going to sound potentially quite laughable, but I really find it difficult to talk about things that I don't know anything about. So therefore,
most people.
I have to do the homework. I really have to do the homework. So when I was a House of Lords minister, I have never worked as hard as any time, apart from maybe when I had a baby. But but then after a while of doing that, I was then invited to become a department minister. So that's a different kind of setup where you're actually attached to a ministerial team in the department. And so I went into the department for universities, skills and science, and then I got moved into the department for what is now the Department for Education. So that, in a way, that's a much more satisfying role, because you actually have a policy brief, and you have you can actually get to know an area, a policy area, more effectively and make a bit more of a difference. But in the Lords, you have to do a lot of legislation because there aren't that many Lords ministers, so I did have to do a lot of legislation, and that I got quite nerdy about it, the process and procedure and how.
I love all that stuff. Quite nerdy.
You're a lawyer, so you.
It's the lawyer.
You can't keep away. But no, so I did quite enjoy the kind of the processy side of it, learning about how the legislature works, and but also it was that very much about how I could really see with my charity sector background in working with coalitions of different charities who were interested in influencing legislation that I was doing, and how they how much more effective they were when they worked together, and to really crystallise out the kind of key issues in a way that me at the time as a government minister could go, whoa, right, I've got a million things to think about, but you have really brought that point together so clearly for me now. I'm going to do something about it. I've got to find a way to do something. So it was really very inspiring actually to see how people working together can get more done. And that's something that I've carried with me always in the charity sector. You have that it's like you have that license to say, no, look, come on, people expect us all to work together, so let's just sit down.
Collaboration is key.
And work out what are the key things that we can get together on. And don't worry about all the other stuff.
So how long did it take until you actually became a baroness? How many years were you in waiting?
Well, I started. When I was it was 2005 when I actually was introduced to the House of Lords. But I did actually have to wait a long time before.
Was it 10 years? No, less than that.
No, it was. I was in a department by the time I had been there for about 5 years. So I'd done my kind of. Time learning the ropes on the back benches, which for me was really important because, I had to feel really comfortable and, there's some people, like Lord Cameron, for example, coming in as the secretary of the foreign secretary, coming in on the front bench, but obviously he's got lots of experience elsewhere in government.
Yes, very good, very good. So in terms of breast cancer now, so you've been there for 23 years in some capacity. I know there's been mergers, etc. And I used to be a board trustee for breast cancer care before they merged. Was it in 2019? Yes. So, just some statistics for people that don't know. I'm really passionate about breast cancer, and breast cancer has caused 685,000 deaths globally in 2020. It might have gone up even more since then. Roughly half of all breast cancers occur in women with no specific risk factors other than sex and age. And breast cancer occurs in every single country in the world. There is not one country that escapes it. And approximately 0.5 to 1% of breast cancers occur in men. And not many people realise that, but men can get breast cancer as well. And one of the things that I think, what I like to do is say to someone, think about 8 women that are in your life. And when you picture those 8 women, one of those 8 women are going to get breast cancer at some point in their life. And sadly, the statistics show that it could actually be more than one. So that's just a bit of some key facts regarding breast cancer. But what would you say? You're clearly retiring in a few months and you will be leaving. What would you say has been the biggest success that you have achieved? And I know there's been many, but what one thing can you be leaving thinking, I'm really proud of that? That is the one thing I'm glad we did.
Well,
I know there's lots.
It's really hard actually. So the first is a sciencey, nerdy thing. So back in the day, so in the late 90s and early noughties, we funded some research into BRCA, BRCA cancers and the functioning of those cancers. And because of that, now there is a drug in existence that's being used around the world for women with a certain type of triple negative breast cancer, where lives are being saved. And the fact that I have through my role, through the charity, through fundraising, through fostering great science through our work, that I've been able to help literally save lives is the most amazing thing for me. The other thing that I'm so proud of is really around the kind of the influencing and campaigning work that we've done. And it's the other end of the spectrum where it is really frustrating that there are some old drugs or drugs that are used in other parts of the health system that could benefit people with breast cancer or prevent breast cancers. And we were able to really help get the Department of Health to understand that while new discoveries get their drug companies behind them pushing the regulatory process.
Yeah.
Old drugs don't have that.
Yeah.
So where there's a new use, they just there's no one pushing it.
Yeah.
So, and we've managed to change that.
Yeah.
And so there is an old drug that can be used to help prevent breast cancer in women who are very, very at a very high risk that couldn't be because of what we've done. And I know that those are two kind of drug-related examples. And then the other one, I will say, is I think we do this thing which is going to be, which is basically it's a patient-led service improvement tool where local services can call on Breast Cancer Now to come in and talk to their patients and say, hey, what can we do to improve experiences here? Yeah. And then let's campaign together to see those improvements put into practice. And that's now been through about 150 kind of cycles in hospitals. Yeah. And it's just those little things like making sure that the clocks work, that there's drinking water available, that the information is there for people when they need it. And then the last thing I will say is through our work at Breast Cancer Now, like lots of charities, we've been really thinking about our equity, diversity and inclusion work and what, we are, we know we're a white middle class organisation, charities are, but we know that we want to be more inclusive and we want to learn and change. And some of the work that I've been able to kick off around grant schemes, around partnering with more community embedded organisations and actually giving the organisation confidence to say, we're not perfect at all, but we can learn and we can change and we can do better. Yeah. And there's real enthusiasm in the charity around that. So I feel really proud about that actually, because I kind of think, well, it's just progress and keeping momentum going. So when I go, I know there'll be lots of people working really hard to continue to make the charity as the best it can be,
Yeah. One of the things I love that Breast Cancer Care does, or Breast Cancer Now does, is it's a very simple photo. It has about 8 breasts, but it shows the different symptoms and how you can actually tell if you've got it, whether it's dimples or it could be discharge or it could be an inverted nipple. There are so many different ways, and I think some people think, oh, I've just got to look for a lump, and it's like, well, no, there are so many other symptoms that can tell you whether or not you have breast cancer, and by looking at that. But the powerful image that I saw is where it was breasts of colour, it was black breasts and Asian breasts, and you've got all these different skin tones. I think that's really inclusive, and that's what diversity is all about. I mean, one of the things that I've done is, I'm finishing off research called the Brawn Review, which is on boardroom sustainability, inclusion, corporate governance, and I know when so this is all in connection with the Miranda Brawn Diversity Leadership Foundation, and we had our annual lecture event on addressing ESG plus the H inequalities, and you had one of your trustees who is a black female, Sonia Gale. She came to actually speak on behalf of Breast Cancer Now, and that was amazing just to have her as part of that panel discussion. And I think we need more of that. We had Wes Streeting, who's the Shadow Minister for Health. He was also there. We had some really powerful voices talking about what we can be doing. What else do you think we should be doing in order to increase diversity within the boardroom and also outside of the boardroom?
Well, I think, certainly in the health environment, we should be doing more, and I know we want to do more, to really empower black health professionals. Yes. And I'm just thinking of it, as an amazing event organised, quite regularly now, called Let's Talk About Black Women and Breast Cancer. Yeah. And I went along to speak at that conference. I was the only white woman on the panel. Yeah. And you just think, that is the way forward. It's empowering these incredible, radiographers, nurses, surgeons, doctors, and in science, for example, there's a really, really low level of involvement of people of colour, and it's just, it's not going to change unless you actually do the work to support people and to support the kind of research and areas that people are interested in. So that's where we've been putting more funding into projects that are, will involve really breaking down barriers and inclusivity. And so you've just got to do it.
You just got to do it, even when it comes to drugs and the side effects, because you're more likely to test the drugs out on potentially a white woman as opposed to a black woman. And there's, even when you do radiotherapy or certain particular drugs might make the skin change colour, and it's very different, in comparison to the colour of skin change to a white woman versus a woman of colour. So these are all really key things. So I'm so pleased that we are moving more towards that.
I do think though that we have to tackle head on this question of equality of outcomes, because if it is the case that that black women and women from South Asian communities have a poorer experience through the NHS. The Cancer Patient Survey shows that. It is the case that they will experience later diagnosis, and that brings with it poorer chances of a good outcome. And for example, the screening programme, so we need to be improving uptake and things like the screening programme, but it's not rocket science.
No,
it is about reaching out to communities and having really good content, really good material, really good networks, and supporting that work. And that's how you're going to improve outcomes in cancer, is by thinking about everybody. And in order to think about everybody, you've got to understand the barriers for some communities, which are absolutely tangible and palpable. And if we don't understand those, then we are literally just doing what we've always done, and then we're not going to get those strides forward that we need.
Spot on. I think education is so key in order to prevent someone from having breast cancer. I mean, I know lots of scientists will say, well, there's not enough research, we can't really say this, but there's a lot of study and data that shows excessive amounts of alcohol can cause breast cancer. Lots of sugar can cause breast cancer. A hectic lifestyle, stress can bring on. Apparently we've all got cancer cells in our body, and it's something that might trigger it. But I know there's not a lot of research to actually confirm that, and that's still research that's taking place. But there's enough study to show that if you do reduce your alcohol consumption, if you do reduce your sugar intake, you take more vegetables, fruit, nuts, that sort of stuff, change your diet, you're less likely, and also exercise, you're less likely to get breast cancer. So I think it's educating people to know, there's a certain lifestyle that can also trigger breast cancer, and if you're aware of certain things, you can probably help to prevent it.
And I think for us, one of the things that Breast Cancer Now are really keen to do is to ensure that women who are potentially at a higher risk of breast cancer can understand their risk and know what could help them to reduce their own risk. And sometimes that will be the risk will be about things that they don't have much control over. But there are things that that we can all do, whether it's heart disease, whether it's cancer.
That's right.
And they are quite sometimes quite demanding for people. Losing weight, eating a healthy diet, all these things can get in the way when you've got a busy family.
And it's not much fun, is it?
It's not necessarily much fun, no. So keeping
balanced diet. It's about another thing that I love about Breast Cancer Now and what you're doing is you're also raising the awareness of not just primary breast cancer but secondary breast cancer. And not many people are aware of what the difference are between the two. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, well, it's the truth is that for some breast cancers there will be a chance that the breast cancer may come back. So that's not just about having a local reoccurrence, which can happen after surgery, after treatment, but sometimes breast cancer can come back in other parts of the body, so in the bones or the liver or the lungs or the brain, and that's what people call secondary or metastatic breast cancer. So it's still come originally from breast tissue, but it's ended up in another part of the body, and that's when it becomes very hard to treat and becomes what people will say incurable but treatable. And
And that's classed as stage 4.
That's classed as stage 4.
Yeah.
So and there are lots of names. So it's secondary, it's metastatic, it's stage 4.
Yeah.
It's
terminal, some people may say.
Yeah.
Like,
but I mean,
I think that all comes down to the mindset.
It does indeed. And what I would say is that having a personalised understanding, advice and support is so important for people going through this. So one great example, my sister has secondary breast cancer. She's had it for over 13 years.
Wow.
But when she was diagnosed, she didn't know. Nobody knew what to say to her about how long she would be able to live.
Wow.
And yet she's managed to keep going for many, many years and had, and what she would say is that she's a miracle of science because she's still going. And
is she still living her life normally?
Absolutely. I mean,
you've got your ups and downs.
You've got your ups and downs. There's a lot of treatment, a lot of scans and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's tough, and people don't always understand what it's like living with cancer.
And that's a disability.
And you look normal as well.
Yeah.
I mean, she wouldn't believe me if I said it, but she does look normal.
Yeah, and sometimes you look very healthy and no one would know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But then there are some, sadly, there are some women and men who might be diagnosed with metastatic disease at the time, what they call de novo, when they're diagnosed with their primary, that's also found to have spread already.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really tough.
Yeah.
Because, life can be really, really difficult then while they go straight into very, very intensive treatment. So so it's a tough thing, and what we would say is that there isn't enough support for people with secondary breast cancer. There's not enough being done, there's not enough research. So much more could be done, and that's really our focus for the future, to try and identify new ways to treat secondary breast cancer, new ways to support, but also ways to diagnose, so that women aren't living with the uncertainty of the aches and pains and so on that could be associated with secondary breast cancer symptoms, so that we can make all of that much, much, much more streamlined and helpful for people as they go through it.
So, talking about the future, what advice would you give our next generation of leaders and maybe current generation of leaders? I know you've mentioned risk-taking, but is there anything else that you would share in terms of mindset success tips to give our listeners?
Absolutely. I think there's something really, really important about understanding your motivations, and then playing into those. So, and then also what gives you energy as well. So, for me, I love people. I love being with people, sharing ideas. I love debating and so on. But also, I do have to have some downtime while I need to reflect. And so understanding how you work, and then really managing your boundaries. So, everybody wants to have an enriching life as well. So, make time to read a book or to go to the cinema to see a film
and live your life.
To music, absolutely.
Live.
Work to live.
Yes.
But for those of us who are in very purposeful organisations, if that's what motivates you, as it has done for me, it's such an honour to be able to do that kind of work.
Yes.
But even then, sometimes, you do get a bit tired, you can get a bit snappy. So always think about, what are you projecting? And, would you enjoy being spoken to like that?
Yes, it's true.
It's
having that empathy and understanding, being compassionate. Yeah. So this D.A.R.E. podcast, it's all about having that mindset, that successful mindset. And I also do coaching around that. And, things that have worked for me, I've studied the law of attraction and manifestation and, vision boards, affirmations. I've done this for like 20, 30 years and it really does work. Have you tried any of that?
I have. I've had a coach for a long time. I've worked with a coach, and we're not really in a coaching relationship anymore. We're now more kind of like we're not more friends now.
Friends, yeah. Because I think that naturally happens.
Yeah,
after
but he
time.
would really challenge me.
Yeah.
And so I found that really useful, having someone who could, actually, sit you down and say, right, come on, what are your goals? What are you doing? How are you evaluating your success? And so absolutely getting that kind of independent kind of check and challenge really, really helpful. And I've tried, one of the things that he got me to do, and I think it's to do with more of a sports kind of psychology thing, was the success wall. Yeah. When you kind of plot out some of the things that you've been successful in achieving, and then you before you swim your race, you look at those, So I have found that quite useful. Yeah. But definitely for me, though, that being clear about having goals and talking it all through with a coach has been fabulous.
No, definitely. And some other tips might be thinking about, if, for example, you're fearful about something, actually writing down what is that you're fearful of. I'm fearful that I won't get that promotion, and then turn that into a positive affirmation. I will get that promotion. And it's, it's just sticking it around, putting some affirmations on a Post-it note or a few, and just having that where you can visualize it, whether it's in the shower or when you're getting ready, wherever that might be, in the car, the wind, the mirror, whatever that might be. I think it's really important to keep seeing that. In order for that to manifest, that's such a key part in having a successful mindset.
That self-talk is positive.
It's so important.
And I think it is something that women find difficult to really recognise their achievements and their value, and having that positive self-talk is, I think, is really good.
Definitely. So, 2 more questions to go. With this question, you're retired. Or you're retiring.
Yeah.
But you're still so young. I can't imagine you're just going to go and read a book, go watch movies. What's the next goal? What's the next thing that you would like to achieve within your career, or whether personal or professional? Well, or maybe both.
I want to achieve a balance with my time.
Yeah.
So I will spend more time in the House of Lords because I feel like that is a duty coming my way.
Yes.
And also I've moved house and I live around the corner from my niece, who has 3 little boys, 5, 3 and 6 months. Yeah. And they are just absolutely amazing. Oh. And her mum lives in Wales, so I'm the kind of most senior person present, as it were. So and they call me Granty, which is great. I love that. Granty Dell.
I've never heard that before. I love that. Granty.
So that's going to be very important for me.
Yeah, family time. It's so important to spend time with family. Yeah. That's one of the key things I love.
And when I was first in my career, and I had a 6-month-old daughter, and I had to go back to work when she was 6 months old. I couldn't afford to take more time off. And my mum was in Wales, my husband's mother was in the northeast, so we didn't really have a lot of support around us in London to help. So I want to change that for her. And,
so she's got that support.
And if my daughter has children, which she may, but it's that kind of it's almost like a luxury to be able to do some of that when you're walking them to school. With their little, with this kind of paper mache rocket. Uniform. Their school uniform,
So where did you grow up?
It's confusing.
It's really a little quick question there. Is it Wales? Or?
Yeah, so my family are Welsh. Yeah. And then in the 60s, my mum and dad moved to London for the swinging 60s. And so I was brought up in London, and then we all went back to Wales. The whole family is in Wales. And so I'm kind of like what they call London Welsh.
No wonder, because you don't really have a strong Welsh accent at all.
No.
Right, lovely. Look, last question. I ask all of my lovely guests this question, and it's all relating to the title. What do you dare our audience to do? And this is in terms of being successful. One of the key things I say is, dream big, be different, be unique. What would you dare our audience to do?
Dream.
Yeah.
Really have an ambitious dream for what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And go for it.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to listen to your story and just hear about your journey and have you share your mindful success tips. I know the audience is going to love it. I've certainly enjoyed talking, getting to know you better, and I wish you the best of luck with your next chapter, which will be more involvement with the House of Lords and family time, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much for your time, your energy and your smile. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.